Hello, welcome to the Shrink Down. Today we're going to be talking about existential dread. And what do we mean by that? We mean that there's a lot of things going on in this world right now that cause us some stress. And so we'll be talking about all these different things like climate change, political instability, and just kind of even smaller kind of expectations that we read a lot about or see a lot about on social media. And then how do we manage our headspace? So how do we deal with all of these things? Before we get into today's topic, we are going to do our 4-minute faves. Lauren, you want to start us off?
Sure. So my 4-minute fave is actually, I had brought it over here, a body oil. Okay.
Ooh.
So this, and I'm sharing it today because I've been using it for about a month. My mom got me for Christmas, and for all of our audience that listens locally, it's from Wallflower Mercantile, but there is the company itself I can link as well. But I'll link the actual little store in downtown Brighton for them as well. It is amazing. So I got it for Christmas. I've been using it every single day as an alternative to body lotion, and I much prefer it now. It takes a little bit of getting used to figure out how much you want to use, so that you don't actually feel oily, and it really doesn't leave you feeling oily. They have got a couple of different smells. This one's like a lavender scent, I should say, that is amazing. But during these winter months, we all live in areas that
Yes.
there's no
We're
way
just
to
talking
keep.
about dry
Oh my
things.
gosh, the dryness.
Terry, I'm
of-
thinking of someone that could use it.
Yes, yes.
That came into.
You can sit in your office.
Very short aside. I tested a little 7-year-old girl this morning at my office whose hand skin was so dry that when I reached out to point out something in a manual, my nail poked her skin and it started bleeding. So we are in
So
the
yes,
dry
she
season.
could benefit from some of this. Yes.
Welcome to the
Actually,
Midwest.
my boys have used it when they've gotten some like cracked, dry skin this last couple of weeks. It's awesome. I love it so much. So sharing it, and we'll do the local link as well as the actual company. It's a small business like company link for it as well. But I really am enjoying it as opposed to body lotion.
I just
So-
switched to oil too. So yeah, when you
Oh my
said that, I was like,
gosh.
yes. I just switched. No,
Yes.
not that one, but yes.
So
It's
thanks to
different
my
texture.
mom for
Yeah.
introducing that.
So it
yeah.
doesn't make you feel oily.
Not
Like
at
it
all.
just.
It like that, and you
Wow.
can see how
It's like
dry your
dragon.
skin is by how quickly it soaks into your skin. At least for me, and I would imagine we're all kind of similar in terms of our climates where we live. It's awesome. I love it.
Oh, I might
This
just.
winter
My
is
legs get so dry
cold.
and itchy,
Yeah.
and oh,
Yeah, it's great.
Mhm.
Yes,
Awesome.
Wilhelmina. What about you?
yeah. So I am really loving this blog. That so it's Kate Arns. I think that's how you pronounce her last name. She started out as a graphic designer. Then she started Wit and Delight, which is a very popular like Instagram. She has a beautiful home, and so I know a lot of it was like rooms and paints and wallpapers and things like that. It started in like 2008. It was one of like the first really, really big ones. And then she is a writer as well. And so she sort of transitioned over the years, and recently her writing, I started like subscribing to her like Substack. It's called House Calls, and she comes out with like a weekly one, and I don't usually read those. I mean, blogging I guess has been around forever, but this is maybe the first one I've ever actually like paid to follow. And her writing is just hitting me at a point in my life. Like I feel like we're similar age. I love the fact that she's from Minnesota. Which is funny because I started following her and didn't know. And then she started posting pictures of like around her house and things like that. I'm like, I know exactly where that is, because she's like, so I know the neighborhood she lives in, and that sounds creepy, but like
There's a familiarity.
there's a familiarity.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. And so, but she just speaks to a lot of things. She's been going through a lot of the same things that I feel like I've been going through in the last couple of years. I feel like it's something that some of the things I could have written myself. And so it's been almost like having a friend sort of give you their own feedback, advice, like thoughts about the world and life and living in it. And I found it very like comforting, inspiring. I just really really like it.
Enjoy it.
And
What's her name again?
Kate Arns, so it's
Okay.
Arends. So her like Instagram page is Wit and Delight, and
Okay.
then her blog is like House Calls with Kate Arns. And like last week she wrote about sort of how you maintain your house, like creating a house that's like you and pursuing a house that feels like authentic to you, and how that balances with actually continually like loss in the sense of like you have to kind of like throw things away, right? You have to purge. And every time you purge, you actually have to recognize like, oh, this is from a stage in life I'm no longer in. And there's like heaviness sometimes to that, right? Like think about when we used to pack up all our kids' things, like the old stages,
yeah.
and you'd be like, oh, and sometimes people would just save that stuff. Like my mom saved a lot of that. And then sometimes it's like, this is no longer, we aren't here anymore. And sort of the grief of loss. And I thought how it was such an interesting juxtaposition to talk about kind of your house and creating a space for yourself, but that also comes with sort of the joy of now and the loss of what was. And she had a quote that was, pursuing a meaningful home life is living with the pain of impermanence and the great joy of having today. So
I like that.
yeah,
cool.
I loved it. So that's my fave today.
Okay.
Well, thank you
Very
for
cool.
sharing.
Yeah.
Terry, what you got today?
Okay, mine is another podcast episode that I just listened to this morning on my drive into the office. The podcast is Work Life with Adam Grant.
Yeah.
So some of you might be Adam Grant fans. He's an organizational psychologist.
I like him.
Yeah, he's good.
Yeah.
His guest on this most recent episode, I believe it came out maybe a week ago, less than a week ago, was Lisa D'Amour,
Okay.
who we all love.
I keep seeing clips
Untangled.
about this episode.
The reason I like this
Yeah.
specific episode, so
Yes.
for those who aren't familiar, Lisa D'Amour is a clinical psychologist based out of Ohio who has written 3 New York Times bestsellers.
One of them was one of my favorites from like
Yes.
last season,
Oh,
Untangled.
yes. Yep.
Untangled, Emotional Lives of Teenagers and Under Pressure, Understanding the Epidemic of Anxiety and Stress in Teenage Girls. She's a guru. She has a private practice in Ohio. She also works part-time at an all-girls private high school. So she is really just embedded and does a lot of talk. She's on the news all the time. She has a monthly New York Times article. I could go on and on. There's
And
so
she
much
contributed to was it her?
Inside
Yeah,
Out.
Inside Out
Yes.
too.
Yes.
She was amazing. And they touch
Maybe
on
for a
that.
second it was Dr. Becky, but nope, it was her. Yeah.
On this, so she was one of the primary psychology consultants for the new Inside Out 2 movie that came out.
That's cool.
And there's so much Lisa D'Amour stuff out there. She actually even has her own podcast called Ask Lisa. But this particular episode is brief. I think it's 40 minutes. And it really highlights some of her main speaking points that I think parents of tweens and teens will find most reassuring. I actually came away from it thinking I need to recommend this particular episode to parents because one, it echoes a lot of what we talk about in our clinical work. I see a lot of teens. I don't see as many as I used to, but I still certainly have a couple teens on my therapy caseload currently. And I think she presents the information in a way that parents will feel more hopeful about some of the specific things related to their teens, peer relationships and friendships. Coming out of COVID, teens got hit really hard psychologically, mentally, and emotionally from COVID. She talks about that. She talks about revisiting Untangled after, I think it was the 10-year mark.
I was going to say 10.
A new edition came out. She said, I had to relook at some things when it comes to vaping. Cannabis is now legal, algorithms on social media platforms. She said there were things that just didn't exist in the world I first wrote Untangled in. So so it sounds like there might even be a new edition, but this is a good episode.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I've been seeing clips, so I'm glad for that recommendation. I'll listen to it.
Yeah, I saw a clip this morning, and I actually sent it to one of my patients because she has been talking about her daughter and going through middle school and friend groups changing and feeling like, does she have friends? Like,
I saw that clip.
Yes. And the clip about how really big groups of teens aren't always helpful. And so sometimes like the best outcome is if your kid has like 1 or 2 close friends. And that's the protective, like that's all they need for that protectiveness of like a friend.
During
friend
those
group.
years.
Yes. And I thought, so many parents, including myself, I needed to hear that. So I thought that was so helpful. That was like a 30-second clip. And I was like, This is amazing.
Taking notes.
It's almost a bullet pointed interview with her
Yeah.
between her and Adam Grant. So
And
it's
that's how he functions. So that makes
Yeah.
sense. That's good
it's
to
good.
know.
It's a good
Cool.
episode.
Awesome.
How about you, Vanessa?
So today I'm going to be sharing a show that was recommended by Wilhelmina
To all of us.
forever ago.
Many years ago.
So this is not a new show. So I was actually looking up because I was like, when did the first season drop? And it was 2014.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was going to say, it was like Charleston on our trip. It was
2014 is when-
years
yeah.
ago that you suggested this.
Yes. So this is Outlander. So the first season dropped in 2014. The 7th season just dropped, like the second part, in November. So it was like almost like perfect timing for me to decide to finally, after this being recommended forever ago. I also had a friend who had recommended the book series. So this is based on a book by Diana, and I'm going to butcher her last name. I think it's Gabaldon is how you say it.
Gabalding or Gabal. Yeah. I had it when I was reading the books. I had it because I actually like listened to the audio, but now it's gone from my head.
I tried to look it up. So something like that. So it's based off a book series. It is currently, so it's a Stars show. But I am watching on Netflix. So Netflix has the first 6 seasons. So I'm hoping by the time I get to the end of the 6th season, they will also have the 7th season. But if not, Stars has it. And then the very last season is coming out next year. So it's already been filmed. So no one has to worry, because I know sometimes some of these shows are like, they haven't even filmed it yet. We have no idea when it's going to drop. So they've already filmed season 8, which is the last season. And so they just need to edit it. Not sure why that's going to take a year. But yeah, so it's coming out next year. And I'm not going to give too much away, but basically it is about this World War II nurse. So that's how the show starts off. In the very first episode, you see her in the field, and all of a sudden the soldiers are cheering and they're saying the war has ended. She's married. Her husband was also in the military at the time. They've been apart now for about 5 years. And so they really haven't seen each other very often. I think they even say in the movie like 10 days total within these last 5 years. So they're now together. The war has ended and they want to kind of rekindle their relationship. So they go on a honeymoon. And on this honeymoon, she travels 200 years
Back in time,
basically 200 years, and finds herself in Scotland in the 1700s. So that's like the fantasy aspect to it. I would not, it's more of a historical drama.
it is, because like once you get past that point, it's just she's there. It's
yeah,
at least.
yeah. So besides the time traveling, the rest of it is there's no other kind of fantasy option.
Yeah.
Well, because
It's a big one for me.
I mean, if you think about like it's not considered high fantasy. It's not like Lord of the Rings. There's no dragons.
It's all
There's
real
no,
in it.
right. So it's
Yeah,
all
makes
real,
sense.
and it's all based in history. So it's all very. So if you're a history buff, you'd probably really like it. So besides the time travel, it's really not fantasy. But I like fantasy, so I really enjoyed it. But it's great acting, great storytelling. The relationships just
so good.
I mean, Jamie Fraser.
I know.
It's so
Just
good.
amazing.
It's really good. So it is definitely mature audience. There's there's obviously there's war stuff. So there's a lot of gore, killing, there's fighting. There's also a lot of sexual content. Some of it's like sexual violence. So like it's definitely mature audience. So, but it is a really great show. I don't know why it took me so long to watch it.
It is so good. Anyone who knows me, I mean, years ago I was talking about it. People were giving me like different scarves from Scotland if they went. I had a friend who gave me like a Jamie Fraser candle. Like I was all in. Yeah.
The worship ones.
It's very good though. It's and the show, the author actually, she consults on the show, and so they would like film a scene and she would be like, no, you can't do that because that's not historically accurate. Like she, different scenes, she'd be like, you can't even have that because that wouldn't have even been around. So in terms of accuracy, they really tried to, and even the costume designer was tried to stay, like her wedding dress, like tried to stay within, like create things that were available then and not like,
right.
It's a good show.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like Like, if you guys liked Game of Thrones, where, like,
Mhm.
there's no I mean, that right,
That
the
is
white
more fantasy
like,
even than
right,
that.
that is
This,
even
yeah.
right, so if you took away, like, the whole White Walker thing, it's like, okay, it was, like, time period, right? Like, there's
Yeah.
fighting, there's, like so then you would remember every once in a while, like, "Oh, yeah, there's this, like, weird fantasy sci-fi thing happening," but, like, for the
Yeah.
most part, it wasn't. It's kind of like that, like, once she's there, you kind of forget that
Yeah.
Yeah.
part. So anyway, it's a good show for anybody who's looking for a new show, and, um, there's a lot of seasons out, so you can
Mhm.
watch it. All right, let's get
Awesome.
into today's topic then. So I thought it'd be maybe we should start off by just going around, just maybe each of us naming like one thing off the top of our head that we're like, yep, this is part of, the dread that we're all feeling, or a lot of us are feeling, not everybody, I guess. But a lot of the kind of things that are going on in the world right now that are impacting us. So let's go around. Well, let me know you want to start. Just throw it out there. You don't have to explain
Yep.
anything. Just
I think the climate change and the state of that and the changing temperatures, as someone from Minnesota and like just the Midwest in general, to see our winters in such a short period of time completely change, it terrifies me to like my core. And so everything that comes with that, I can't even watch like animal documentaries and things like that, because it just, every single one is like, well, the bees or the polar bears or this, like, it like feels overwhelming to my soul. And I feel definitely like hopeless when I start to think about it. So that one's top on the list. Terry, what about
yeah.
you?
So interestingly, that was the first thing that came to my mind was
Yeah.
what you said about
Mhm.
how dramatically the winters have changed. And I think about how my kids spend time outside in the snow compared to even 4 years ago, 5 years
Mhm.
ago to now. I would add to that, among all things, um, just the political climate and
Mhm.
instability
Yep.
that we're
Mhm.
in and what we're likely entering. And I fear this for a lot of professions, but I don't know how divisive politics are right now,
Mhm.
how anyone who is reasonably intelligent and would go into politics going forward in the
Right.
future.
Right.
Right.
Who is being attracted to politics? Who is
Right.
being attracted to law enforcement? I feel the same way about law enforcement,
Mhm.
is thinking about what the
Teaching.
police officers
Oh,
teaching,
yeah.
education. I think about what these professionals have to go through on a daily basis, both on a microscopic level on their day-to-day jobs, as well as more globally. And I think just the people who are in some of the most important
Yeah.
professions,
Yes.
teaching, help, law enforcement, firefighters, etc.
Mhm.
I mean, who's going to go into these politics? Because
Yeah.
it's very, very challenging
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
think about who's going to be leading things for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, one of the kind of general topic is all the health related things that we're
Mhm.
supposed to be juggling. Like that really, I feel overwhelmed at times by that. So it's like, get this much sleep, don't eat that, do eat this much exercise. And it's just like this constant, like, oh my God, I
Constant.
can't do
This
that.
amount of protein per
Right.
day.
There was this funny
Mhm.
meme I sent you guys the other day. Like the lady was like, we all have to paint our chicken with cottage cheese, right? Because we have to get
Get it
enough
enough
Enough.
protein.
protein. And it's overwhelming. You're like, oh my gosh, am I doing the right
Yeah.
thing? Am I exercising enough? Am I eating the right thing? I can't eat that. I can't do that. And so it becomes overwhelming because it's not just you, right? It's your family too, right? Like, am I feeding my child the right thing? Now there's all, luckily we're all excited about this like red dye ban, but there's all these other things, right? And so, you want to make sure your kid's eating the right thing, but you also don't want to be too strict with your kid, right? Like there's all these things. So it's not just how some of these things impact us,
Mhm.
ourselves, but it's also how does this impact our families and our kids?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking about that as well. And I make a point. I try really, really hard to practice what I preach in this particular area. So for me, this is not something that I engage. I don't want to sound annoying. This is going to sound so annoying. I I don't engage in existential worry and dread. I don't, because I make an active point to really try to be incredibly mindful of when I start to go that route. But to piggyback off of what Vanessa was saying, certainly the health, and then just aging
Yeah.
parents, having
Yes.
aging
Mm.
parents. I don't want to think about it, right?
Mhm.
And I think those kind of go hand in hand. But it is something that, and I think for me, and we'll get into kind of techniques and things, but
Yeah.
there was so much existential dread during COVID
Mhm.
that my
Oh.
husband and I made a really conscious decision not to engage in that
Mhm.
and to be really sort of focused on the things that we could control. And I know, again, we're going to get into that piece of it. But I see that as certainly we have clients, we have patients, we have friends, some of us ourselves. It's easy to lose sight of that and engage in some of these things. And it can be really overwhelming, to Vanessa's point, especially with everything that's available for you to be able
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
engage in existential dread. It's called doom scrolling, right? It's
Yeah.
just like going from, and then of course the
Your
algorithm
Algorithm.
algorithm.
Oh,
catches
yeah.
you right in that doom scroll if you spend too long on a specific topic. So it's easy to get engaged with that on social media, or even just from watching too much news,
News.
local
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
national.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so I can see the vulnerabilities there with all of these topics.
Absolutely.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah, it definitely is. Well, and I think sometimes now once you start like attaching to it and it starts to permeate like all of your thoughts. I mean, I was picking up something at a store the other day and I was parking and this guy walked out of the store and he clearly had like something small and it was just in like a plastic bag. Like he was just like swinging around, it was just like, and I was like, why did he get a bag? Like clearly whatever is in there,
Oh,
he could have literally just walked out with. He didn't need to put it in a plastic bag. And I just was like, ah. And I was like, why am I even thinking this? But like, so
it's a good example though. Of
Yeah.
literally like swinging this thing. And I was like, excuse me,
why.
sir, could you please put that back? Like, and meanwhile, I am walking out of, sometimes if I go into the grocery store, I'm like, I'm just going to grab one thing. And then I end up grabbing more inevitably, right? But I was like, nope, I walked in here without a bag. I'm like, I got it. No, I'm fine. I don't need a bag. I'm like the person that's like trying to minimize everything. And then I see that and I'm like,
But that's a really good
Hmm.
example of control what you can
Right.
control.
yeah,
Control what you
yeah,
can do.
Right.
You can use
And
your reusable bags,
you can't control what
make sure
other
your
people
kids do.
choose to,
Right.
right.
Yeah.
It's going to drive you nuts.
it is. It does drive me nuts.
Yeah. And when
Right.
I find myself both trying to practice for myself as well as discuss with my patients, and in particular, it's my college age and young adults, or even
Yes.
I actually have a couple not older adults. I have a couple women in their 30s and 40s who I'm seeing, but
So your age is what you're
yes, so
saying.
my age. And I will say on the younger end, there's more existential dread
Oh, yes.
than
Mhm,
there
mhm.
is
Absolutely.
Yeah.
for the women in our age bracket.
Mhm.
That being said, it's a lot of what I was suggesting during COVID,
Mhm.
where you do this delicate balance of zooming out and zooming
Mhm.
back in. So when
Mhm.
you find yourself zoomed out for too long, I'm
Mhm.
going to zoom back in and
Yep.
pull the weeds out in my backyard.
Yep. Yep.
I'm going to
Yep.
focus on
Yeah.
what's in
Focus
my
on
little
this
bubble,
circle. Yep.
Yep.
focus on the circle. The circle's going to widen. And
Yep.
then I'm going to maybe spend some space there to honor that. So
Yep.
you're not living in a fantasy
Yep.
necessarily, but
Right.
then you're okay. I've spent enough time here. I've had enough news for today. I've had enough doom scrolling, etc., or
Right.
texting or conversing with friends and family about it. I'm going to zoom back in. The
Mhm.
zooming out, I think, will happen more naturally for some people more than others.
Yeah.
And when you
Yeah.
find yourself doing that, then you zoom back in, and it all boils down to that. Is this under the category of things within my total control, some of my control, or none of my control? And if you
Right.
can divvy up the particular issues, and this sounds very simplified, but if you can, I tell the young adults I
Yeah.
work with this, if you can put them in one of those three baskets
Mhm.
and then harness that energy and ask yourself, if I have partial control over this particular issue, how am I going to exert that control? What's that going to look like behaviorally? Am I living a values based life based on my
Mhm.
behaviors? Do I
Mhm.
need to be
Yeah.
shifting based on what
Mhm.
I value? And the other thing I often think about, especially for myself, I will ask myself, is this an experience I want to continue having?
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
Yep.
And I'm going to focus my energy on the experiences that I would like to continue having.
And you can't do that without being able to identify your values. So I think what
Yes.
you just said is a really important point, is understanding what you actually find important and what you
Yes,
actually
that's
want
how
in
you
life.
manage
Because
all
it's
that. Yeah,
really
yeah,
easy to engage in catastrophic thinking about all the different events of
right.
the world, right?
Mhm.
And really taking a beat to say, one, do I just want to vent about this? Because if you
Mhm.
want to vent, go for it, right? There's always going to be somebody that you can, you can just
I do
vent
that.
with and
Mhm. Yeah.
recognize, like, I just want to complain about this thing.
Mhm.
Or do you
Offload. Get
actually,
rid of the
right,
Mhm.
garbage.
Mhm.
Right.
right? Or do you actually find this something that is important for you to problem solve? Is this something that you value in your life and you want to take small steps? And then what Terry said, zooming in. So going into that inner circle, what's that number one circle around me, and what are the steps that I would take? And usually it's taking care of yourself and your own. And
Yeah.
that was when I had referenced COVID and my husband, we would always go back to, okay, what can we do today to keep ourselves and our kids happy, healthy,
Mhm.
sane during this period of time, during those, those like shutdown weeks, right? Get outside, take a walk, get some fresh air. It was like, this was within our control.
Mhm.
And you
Mhm.
started to zoom out and there was less and less within your control, and that gets really scary and overwhelming. So the question is, why would I do that to myself? So, using a technique that we all use for folks in therapy called cognitive diffusion, being able to recognize that those are just thoughts that I'm having.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I can separate myself from those thoughts if I'd like to, or I
I
can totally engage and doom scroll and vent and do all of those things. But then I need to recognize that that's what I'm doing. I'm engaging with my thoughts right now, rather than cognitive diffusion, the idea of separating myself from my thoughts.
I am not my
Mm.
thoughts. I'm not my
Yes.
Yeah.
feelings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Right.
and I think that I know, like the day after the election, I had several of my patients, almost all of them actually, came to me with different thoughts and feelings and whatnot. And many of them did feel like it impacted them directly. A lot of them had fear for their kids and their daughters or their um, sons. And so it was hard to say, like, well, this doesn't concern you, or, not, but like, because they did feel like it affected them. So then we really like talked about mindfulness and like right
Mhm.
now. I said,
Mhm.
right now, you
Mhm.
guys are okay. Right now, you are, your
Safe
daughter
and
is
healthy.
safe and
Yep.
healthy. And so it was sort of like, it, even though it felt very personal and very much part of like their inner family, it was not something that was currently an issue. And so it was that sort of like, let's step back like and look at the right now and what is actually happening right now for you and your family. And
Mhm.
then you can sprinkle in gratitude. Well, yeah,
Sparkle.
why not?
Yeah.
Sure.
Gratitudes and things like that, of like, really, let's focus right now on what you're thankful for, grateful for, and that you have within you and your
Mhm.
family.
I was thinking of what Lauren, you said about you have to prioritize what's important to you. And I
Mhm.
think that that's especially true when thinking about like all these things, but especially like all those health things that I was talking about. And I
Right.
think you just have to decide what is important to you and focus on those things,
Right.
and then be okay with the idea that other people are going to have the things that they're
Yes.
focused
Yep.
on. And
Yes.
that's okay. And for me, I'm fine having my friends say whatever they're worried about. Like, I welcome that, but I
Yeah.
don't necessarily feel
You'd
pressured
identify.
that
Yeah.
I have to
Yes.
do those things. And
Yep.
I think that takes effort to do that, because you can be consumed by other people's
Yes.
Totally.
worries, and you're right, oh, maybe I should be worrying about that, right? Because they're worrying about
Right.
that. And so I do think that takes some effort on your own part to not feel that you have to take on other people's worries and concerns,
Right.
and be able to kind of manage that in a different space, right? So like, yeah, we're talking about it now, and then I can just kind of set that aside because that's not my worry.
Right.
Like, I have these other set of things that I'm going to focus on
Yeah.
and put my effort into, in kind of addressing and thinking of those things, because otherwise you will lose your mind.
Well,
I was
and what
just, oh, yeah.
what
Yeah.
that means is, though, you actually have to have a very you have to have an understanding of yourself and your
Right.
values, going back to
Absolutely.
that,
Right.
because otherwise you will be like, well, is this what I should be worried about? Oh, this is what I should be worried about. Oh, this is what I
Mhm.
should be worried about. And so it does take sort of take a beat and what actually resonates with me,
Yep.
and
Mhm.
not And so many people have trouble with that. And so then therefore all of it feels the same level of importance when
Right.
maybe in
Right.
reality it's not.
Right. I was listening to Not Skinny But Not Fat's podcast, and she had a
Oh, yeah.
guest on,
I like
and
her.
they got
I
into
like her too.
they just kind of stumbled into a conversation about oat milk. And the guest was like, "Do not come for me. Something will kill me. I'm having oat milk in my coffee. This is my choice. I
Yeah.
can't engage." This guest was excellent. It was an actress. And she was like, "I cannot engage in this conversation right now. There's going to be something that's bad for me. This is my thing. I will not get rid of oat milk. I know it's full of fat and sugar, and when you go to Starbucks, they give you artificial whatever. I mean, I don't know anything about
I
oat
was
milk,
going
but
to
it
say,
was
I'm like,
very
what's wrong with oat milk now? My God.
I don't know, but
Oh my
the
God.
point was she did such a great job of in a very funny way, but just saying, yeah, something is gonna poison me or kill
Right.
me, but this is my thing, and I will focus on something
Yeah.
else
Yeah.
Yes.
that I choose that's important to me to modify or change because it's not healthy, et cetera, et cetera. But it was very funny in the way she did it, but it's so true, right? She was like, "Do
Mhm.
not come for me on this one. I'm not changing it. This is my thing. I know how terrible it is for you." But yes, to your point,
That's-
Wilhelmina, I have no idea.
And that's a good point, because I think a lot of the things we're talking about are truly, they're true, right? A lot
They're
of
real.
the things,
To a
they're
degree,
real.
yes,
To
yes.
some degree, these things are, unhealthy or not good for you. There is issues with right? All these things are true. It's that you can't worry about
Yeah.
everything.
It can be
Right?
true,
Even if there's
and you don't have to take it on.
exactly.
Yes.
Two
Right.
things can be
Yes.
real at the same
Right.
time, right?
One of
So
my
yeah,
favorites.
absolutely. So you
Yeah.
can absolutely, something can be unhealthy, and you just say, okay, well, I'm still gonna drink my oat milk, right?
Yes.
Or, remember, guys, I just sent you that thing about the wristband for the Apple
Oh,
Watch.
yeah.
Apparently it's toxic.
Like, well, our conversation a
I
couple
still
weeks
have my
ago
watch
about-
on.
Listen, our conversation about alcohol. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, but I'm still
Right.
going to have my glass of wine. But guess
Right.
what? I'm not doing 100 other things that are unhealthy for me. So
Right.
I'm going to have that because you have to
Right.
figure out at some point
Right.
what works for you. I know people that have gotten so into the perimenopause conversation and started so many different supplements, and it's actually made it worse for them because they
Mhm.
don't really actually know what their body needs and what they actually
They're just
how-
throwing things out there
they're
and
Yes.
seeing
just
what's
throwing
Yes.
things at the
That's
wall.
another
And
big
it's
one,
like,
though, that
it is
true, right? We all, I think, can agree in this group that we don't have a lot of research on perimenopause. There's a lot
Right.
of work to do in this field. There's a lot of things that we're learning
right.
that have gone kind of untalked about and untreated. So I think we can all agree that. But I think, for me personally, you guys can chime in, it is
Yep.
so overwhelming that at
100%.
times I just want to crawl under a blanket and be like, so I could see why somebody would say, I don't know, right? I don't
Right.
I can't even think about this because it's just too much.
And when you look at the symptom list,
Oh,
it's
literally
exhaustive.
everything.
It's everything. And I'll say I had a frozen shoulder for almost 2 years before that was even mentioned, and I happened to
still
hear about
have
it.
it.
And I do too. It's year 3. I'm going on year 3. Can't.
My gosh.
And it's just so, I agree with you because it's so overwhelming. And maybe this is what's happening. Let's self-diagnose this. And then maybe if you self-diagnose this, then you do this concoction of treatments and figure this out. And it's this combo of amount of sleep and protein and supplements. And
Yep.
I think there is this wellness myth that's been around for a long time.
Mhm.
The wellness industry in the 1980s really did a number on people, where this myth that you can achieve a perpetual state of well-being if
Yes.
you do this particular hybrid concoction of activities. And currently, right now, I think we have exercise, meditation, protein, supplements, sleep,
Supplements,
alcohol, dyes, nonstick pans, not using nonstick pans, on and on, where I do think we're still being fed a line of bullshit when it comes to that if you do a particular hybrid,
Right.
you won't be in perimenopause.
Because
Right.
guess what?
Yeah.
Nobody factors in genetics.
Yes.
Nobody factors in how you yourself function. And you're right. I was going to say, and it speaks to what you're saying. not only just about health, but all of these things, all of these existential topics have been around
Yeah.
forever.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
So our grandparents, it was World War II.
Mhm.
Right. Our parents, it was JFK getting shot when they were in elementary school, and like what that meant and how scary that was.
And not even just
Um,
him, Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert
right.
Kennedy and
Mhm.
the civil rights
Mhm.
movement. And it was a
Right.
very scary time
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
be
Right.
around, to be alive.
Right. And so these the topics, like the actual topics might change a little bit, but existential dread is something that's always been around, and it's part of the way that we're programmed,
I
Hmm.
right?
think
And so
part
we
of it
have
is
to ask,
how
yeah,
how how not how we can consume it, how it's consumed, right? So
right.
back then, I don't besides a newspaper, your neighbors, your right? Like I feel like that is part of why
It's
people
easier
now
consumption.
yes,
Yeah.
because you can just go on your phone, right? Like it's
Right.
at your fingertips constantly. If your phone is linked to your watch,
Your
it's
toxic watch.
my
Yeah.
toxic watch is going to kill me.
That's gonna kill me.
I'm gonna die from my watch. But like I'm getting the news blinging on my right. So it's like you're inundated with it. So I think that you're right. A lot of these topics have been around. I
Yeah.
just wonder if the difference now is how easily accessible it is and
Mhm.
the frequency of the
Mhm.
information that it's like
I
overload.
I
Mhm.
think it's such an interesting point that you make, Lauren, and that you're saying, Vanessa. My father-in-law, who passed away a couple years ago, or maybe 6 years ago now, when Donald Trump was elected the first time, and it wasn't even just his election, there was lots of other stuff going on in the news
Mhm.
at that time.
Mhm.
And he was a retired police officer and then a
Mhm.
detective. So he had a very interesting career and saw a lot of
Mhm.
things. He was
Hmm.
Yeah.
also a veteran. And I remember saying to him, gosh, things feel really heavy right now and really big. And he looked at me and said, the 60s were pretty rough. He
Yeah.
goes, it
Mm.
was pretty bad then. Exactly the same time point you're referencing. He
Hmm.
said, we had all of our leaders being assassinated, sometimes on
Mhm.
TV. He said,
Mhm.
it was really, really heavy. The civil rights movement,
Right.
etc. He said, the difference was we watched the nightly news
And then
once a
that was it.
night. And
Mhm.
that was the only exposure.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I said, "Well, have things ever been this bad?" And he pretty quick came back at me and
Yeah.
said, "The
Yeah.
60s were pretty bad."
hmm
Yeah, and I think
Having lived
every
through both.
generation has the big topics that they worry
Yeah.
about.
hmm
Yeah.
And it's but to Vanessa's point, it's the accessibility now. And
Yeah.
so it adds that extra layer of you really have to know yourself well to
hmm
know what can you handle.
Yeah.
Yes.
What do you need to not avoid, not stick your head in the sand about, but rather just, okay, that's enough for me today. And then zooming back in,
hmm
and saying, okay, here's what I can control, here's what I can do. And typically that's taking care of yourself and those around you, right?
hmm
And making sure that those things are functioning. Because if we all do that, we're all better off in all different aspects of life.
hmm
And not spending too much time at there and then, as we
Right.
say in the therapy
Mm-hmm.
world, spending more
Mm-hmm.
time here and now
Here and
and not
now.
Right.
so much
Yeah.
there
Here
and
and
then.
then.
Well, I
Yep.
think too, we've talked a little bit about the things that we can do to kind of help. We've talked about like, mindfulness and,
Mm-hmm.
focusing on what you can control. And I think the important thing for people to know is that everybody worries, has moments where they worry or they feel nervous or they feel anxious, however you want to, whatever word you want to use to describe that, that's normal. But when these feelings start to overtake your life and it start to
Yeah.
impact your functioning and you can't quite control it yourself by trying to do some of these things, then that's a time where you might say, I think I need to go get some therapy or some counseling and know that that's okay. That's okay. You
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
don't have to feel like you
Mm-hmm.
have to figure it all out on your own, right? Because I think that then just causes more anxiety. So I think it's important for folks to know that there are lots of things that you can do yourself to manage this. But if you're getting to the point where you feel like I'm not able to manage this, I'm not sleeping well, or it's starting to impact your functioning, then that could be the sign for you to say, I need to go get help from someone who can help me practice mindfulness, learn more how to do that. We talk about deep
Mm-hmm.
breathing and, meditation and all these things. And sometimes it's hard to do those things by yourself. And so working with someone who can kind of help guide you through these things can be really beneficial.
Absolutely.
And I think that being able to do something that feels actionable for
Mm-hmm.
you in your life, when you're feeling overwhelmed about a topic can be helpful. So there was a Psychology Today article about actually for therapists helping their clients deal with client change worry. And it was saying, it had a list of sort of like, here are some things you can do. And, one of them was like, maybe get involved. If it feels good to you to like do something, then find something that is a group that you feels like you're taking some action. Like then it was get outside. You're worried about the world in nature and all of it, then get outside and actually like be with nature, because that can actually help you during like the dread about climate change. And then it did talk about then being grateful for what you are and making like a list every day of like, here are some things I'm grateful for today. Not necessarily about what you're worried about, but just the balance. It's the balance. It's the zooming out and in one kind of like circular kind of continuous movement. And Terry, I was thinking about, you sent us a text last week and you were like, okay, I've been living, la 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 with the nonstick pan, whatever.
I purposely kept my head buried because I'm a big Andrew Huberman podcast fan. And that episode I have purposefully skipped over.
Oh, he'll drive you nuts with this kind of stuff. Every one of his episodes is existential.
I know.
Yes, it is.
You're never doing enough to be
You're never
your
good.
peak.
You're never good enough. You're not an optimizer. He calls them optimizers.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
What's the opposite of
been
optimizer?
I've been staring at my nonstick pans for years now and like seeing them scratched and like just being like, we're just dying a little bit each time we make something. And yet sort of feeling frozen of like,
Like I'm hungry.
I'm hungry.
Well, make some bacon.
Which will also kill me. So
Exactly. I'm going to pour a glass of wine, make some bacon in my nonstick pan that's
My
peeling
black
away.
spatula.
With my plastic spatula. I'm feeling good about myself right now. But actually it was helpful because when Terry sent that to me, I was like, I actually took all my nonstick pans out and I made a list of the pans that we had. And then I set aside like 3 of the ones that were just really bad. And then I went online and I just found a couple. I haven't ordered them yet, but they're in my cart. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do a little bit at a time.
Right. I
so
thought
that
one small step.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I'm doing nothing and I've been worried about it. I can't spend $3,000 and just get all new kitchen set,
Like my husband. Oh, tell you guys that story.
Believe me, I'd want to, but Owen would, if he was mad about my $15 whirly pop, you can imagine he would not be thrilled about what is this giant package from Green Pan? Nothing. Don't worry about it. Nothing.
Saving your life. Like, shut up.
Right. Yes.
No.
This is for us. This is for all of us. We can live
I
forever.
have to tell you this. So Mark got into so my husband is the one in our family who worries most about the nutrition stuff. So for me, like, I almost feel like I don't have to.
You don't have to. He's doing it.
So it's like, whatever, And so he got on the nonstick. He's been saying it for a long time. And then finally he's like, I'm doing this. I'm gonna go do. So he did some preliminary research and spent like over $1,000 getting this whole new set for us.
Where did he get it from?
I don't want to say because
what if you
after
don't like
he
it?
bought them, they were still they came in a bunch of boxes. So they're arriving. We hadn't even gotten them all. He was talking to a friend who was like, oh my gosh, those pans are actually terrible after you use them for a while. Because this person had bought them, his friend was like, they started to basically fall apart. And so then
please let us know via text message what they are.
So he was really sad about it because he thought he was solving our nonstick pan problem. So he basically, we waited till they all came and then we sent them back. We didn't even open the packages. So now he is now doing more research. So I will get back to you all once he's done with his deep dive into
it's like paper straws. It's like
paper straws are the worst.
Oh.
It's like, I know they think they're solving a problem, but excuse me, they are
Speaking
terrible.
of like dry skin, your like lips, you're like,
they're terrible. Yes.
Oh my God. And then they have these like they're not, so I think they tried to make a different version of the straw and it's like made out of plastic, but it's not. Right. And then they always have cracks in them. So then you're like holding the straw in 4 places.
Makes it
trying
worse.
to like hold the hole.
Right.
Oh, it's just
It's
you
always
can't
going to be
win.
something.
You can
I was
never
going to
win.
say,
Well,
right?
Always something.
Yeah.
All right,
Always
ladies. Any
something.
more thoughts on today's topic?
The only thing I would add
Yeah.
related to cognitive diffusion in
Yeah.
terms of separating, not treating your thoughts like facts.
Mhm.
I'm a huge fan of one-liners in my therapy work.
Yep.
And I feel like all of us are probably.
Yeah.
And the two are don't believe everything you think
Yeah.
and thoughts are not facts.
Yep.
Yeah.
And sometimes just reminding yourself of that
Mhm.
can be helpful.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
talking, so, I mentioned the therapy thing, but even just talking, like Wilhelmina said, you're glad that Terry brought it up.
Yep.
So talk to your friend,
Yeah.
I think just sometimes saying these things out loud can make you feel like,
It makes
Oh.
it smaller.
yeah,
Yes.
it's not
Yeah.
such a big
Yeah.
deal, especially when
Mhm.
someone might say, oh yeah, I've had that same thought, like,
Mhm.
and it can help minimize it. It can also help you, like, if you're worried, like, is this something I should be worried about, sort of thing.
Right.
So I think talking about it is really helpful. Kind
Yeah.
of putting it out there, see how,
Stops
Well,
it from snowballing.
And
Mhm.
with that, like sometimes I was like, am I the only one still using nonstick pans? Am I the only one? So honestly, when Terry said that and then we all chimed in, I was like, okay, I'm not the only one. Like, and that
No.
honestly comforted me. I was like, well, we'll all die together then. Okay.
Yeah.
At the same
Yeah.
time. I was like,
died
okay,
by nonstick pan.
cause of death, nonstick pan.
4 people at the same time.
Oh gosh.
Oh my gosh. But it did. It was sort of like it sort of brought me down to earth. I'm like, okay, this is not in my head. I created something like I am the last woman on earth using nonstick pans. Not true. Not true.
Not true. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Please join us next time on The Shrink Down.